Hello, I think I'm back with you. Um, I think we're up to 20 people. I think we've got 40 people signed up today. As you will probably know, Paul Adams is our speaker today. Paul is already on. Paul is Chief Executive Officer of the CMC, and he's going to talk to us about what's been happening with the CMC for the last 12 months or so, and what is likely to be happening, hopefully, in the foreseeable future. Paul, if you're ready, do you want to take on?
Dave, thanks very much. Welcome, everyone. It's always nice to come along to Mediation Breakfast Club. I think this might be the third or fourth time I've done this. My intention this morning is just to talk a bit about CMC, what we're here to do, where we are at the minute, and hopefully what we're going to be doing over the next sort of 12 to 24 months. For those of you that don't know me, I have been CEO of CMC for the last 7 years, taking over at a period when the CMC was not the organisation it is now, and indeed the mediation sector not in the situation that it is now. So we've come a long way in that period of time. I'm not a mediator. My background is essentially charity management, particularly membership organisations. Whilst I'm the CEO of CMC, I'm also the CEO of the Chartered Institute for Logistics and Transport. So I bridge the two organisations, and that is hugely useful. I think there's lots to learn from other sectors. Fundamentally, membership organisations are membership organisations, almost irrespective of the cause, if you like. So I'm very lucky to be able to sort of draw on experience from outside the mediation sector. As we know, the situation for mediation is changing and changing rapidly. Not only with the forthcoming integrated mediation, as the government are now calling it, but with a growth in mediation kind of across the board. The organisation is coming to the end of a 5-year strategy, so our 2019-2024 strategy is coming to an end. So it's a good time to come and talk to you all. We have a strategy meeting at the end of the month with the board to look at what we're going to do for the next 5 years. And I've been in the process of writing a kind of appraisal of where we've got to, excuse me, over the last few years, what things have worked, what things haven't worked, and hopefully that will help to inform us in devising the new strategy. The other thing to say about strategy is that we will be having a consultation. So after the meeting at the end of this month, we will be putting out a consultation to the membership to gain ideas, kind of to harness the intellectual horsepower of the wider membership, to enable us to ensure that we've looked at the strategy from all angles. As experience has taught me, you can never please everyone. So there will be aspects that some people will want the CMC to pursue that we either will choose not to or aren't able to pursue. And I think it's important to remember that CMC is purely funded by our member subscriptions. I think some people historically have thought that the CMC is a vast organisation with unlimited resources. That's definitely not the case. I'm CEO. I'm part-time. We now have a team of about 6 of us who work for the organisation, but all work remotely. We don't have an office, and all of us are contractors. So we are a small and tightly knit team, and there is always limits to what resources we've got, and that is one of the things we need to tackle looking at the strategy over the next few months. So that's just a sort of snapshot of where we are right now. I think I'd like to begin by taking a look at where we've come over the last few years. When we wrote the strategy in 2019, the key tenet of that strategy was what we termed at the time automatic referral to mediation, ARM. And I distinctly remember when we announced it to the membership, there were a significant number of members who said there's no way that we would get ARM within 5 years. We have ARM coming in. It's now called integrated mediation. I think the terminology changes on a month-by-month basis, but there we go. But we are moving to a situation where mediation is going to become a much more core tenet of the justice system in this country, and that can only be a good thing. Is it the mediation that we recognise and that we want? No, perhaps not. But I think the key point to make here is that it's about getting the door open, and the integrated mediation that's been announced for this autumn has got the door ajar, let's say. It's of limited interest to our members in that it will be delivered by government employed mediators, and it is a watered down version of mediation, but it is also for the lower value claims, and fundamentally dealing with the large numbers of those lower value claims is difficult for our members to make a living out of. So actually it's of lesser interest. The main reason why we've been driving the implementation of integrated mediation is because of what it leads to. And the key thing there is leading to the higher value claims, which we are told are likely to be outsourced to the market, and they will be much more financially interesting for our members to be involved in. So that is the golden chalice, if you like, and both in terms of providing more work for our members, but also in terms of changing the culture of the UK, or particularly England and Wales, and ensuring that mediation becomes a much more integral part of people's lives, both in the commercial sector and personally. And obviously, we've seen the work that the Family Mediation Council have done over the last few years, which has helped to ensure that mediation is a much more integrated part of society these days. So that has been our goal over the last 5 years, and I think we're definitely getting there. Have we arrived yet? No, absolutely not. Will we continue to pursue integrated mediation? Yes, absolutely, we will. In whatever, or in the best form that we can possibly negotiate with the government. So that's where we've got to on that. 5 years ago, when we wrote the strategy, the CMC was in a very different place. I think from memory, we had about 450 members, so we've now doubled that number. We had an organisation that was fundamentally run by volunteers. You'll be aware that CMC is governed by its board, and that board had taken on a lot of operational matters. So essentially things like marketing, social media, all that was done by board members. There was a team of 2 of us, Helen Anthony, who still runs the secretariat for the FMC, who I spoke to yesterday, and myself, and that was it. Over that 5-year period, we have gradually professionalized the functions of the CMC. Starting off with bringing in external experts to help us run our social media and our comms. And those of you who are members who have seen our stuff on the internet will hopefully appreciate the improvements that have been made there. I clearly remember a fairly woeful website, which took us some time to get sorted. So gradually over that period, communications and information from members has improved. Other aspects that we've gradually managed to professionalize and put on a paid footing finance. More recently, particularly our complaints process. Even 2 years ago, our complaints process was taking too long, and one of the roles that we play, particularly for government, is our ability to regulate our members and provide structure and regulation within a obviously an unstructured sector. So, and that's particularly important for government. And we'll talk more about that as we go through. So over the last 18 months, we've professionalized our complaints and disciplinary procedures, brought in experts from other sectors to enable us to run a much more professional and comprehensive service, which is delivering outcomes in a much shorter time frame. And so that's definitely something that has improved over that period of time. So what else has happened? Well, we changed our membership structure. Those of you who were around a few years ago will be aware that for a long time, CMC only registered mediators, and that was it. That was the only membership category we had. We've enhanced that both to recognise seniority in terms of bringing in the fellow membership, but also to ensure that we were capturing people out of training. 3 years ago, something like 90% of those who passed a CMC accredited course didn't go on and become members. And obviously that's a pretty poor conversion rate. And part of the reason for that was the requirement for observations and the fact that the minimum level of registration we allowed had required you to navigate both the training hurdle, but also the observation. So we brought in associates, which has been extremely popular, and what we're now looking to do is help to deliver CPD to those, to all of our members, but particularly to those perhaps younger or less experienced mediators, to help them develop a career within mediation, and that has been hugely popular. I think to date, now about 1/3 of our membership are associates, and that bodes well for the future. One of the concerns that government has in terms of bringing in integrated mediation for higher value claims is whether or not we have the capacity within the sector to handle what would be a significant number of claims each year. I'm confident that we will have by the time it comes in, and I think the challenge will be, or our challenge back to government then, is to make sure that there is a viable business model for those mediators. Fundamentally, government has to put its hand in its pocket and make sure that remuneration for mediators working in that space is sufficient to make it attractive to a new generation of mediators coming in. And right now I'm reasonably confident that will happen, because it is in the government's interest to make sure it's a success. The current backlog in the courts and the cost means that whichever way you look at it, the mediated solution is a better business model. As I said, membership has grown significantly. I think we're up 12% year to date. Associate mediators are up 24% year to date. Last year we grew about 20% in a single year. So that's all good. One of the challenges that we face, despite a growing membership, is as mediation evolves, and as we look to evolve the organisation and professionalise it, is that the costs go up, and we are up against our cost threshold, if you like. We made a loss last year, predominantly because of the way we account. So we account on an accruals basis, and that means that if somebody joins the organisation after the 31st of July, 31st of June, 30th of June, we actually make a loss on that member in that year, because more of their membership is pushed. Membership fee is accounted for in the final year, so in the following year, sorry. which is a crazy situation. And actually, we have grown so quickly in the last sort of 2 years that has actually, on paper at least, undermined our financial position. Seems crazy, but that's the way the accountants work things out. So that is now starting to level out as growth continues, and also as we start to see the benefit of particularly last year's growth coming into the financials. So the position for CMC financially is positive. You know, there's money in the bank, everyone gets paid, but there are definitely limitations to our resources, and things that we would like to do on a greater scale or do at all even, we're unable to do because of those resource limitations. It's a slight chicken and egg scenario. Because the sector is growing, there are expectations, particularly from government, of our ability to provide a structured, regulated profession without any funding from government. So the long-term potential is huge. You know, we're all very confident that the mediation sector will flourish over the next few years, but we're having to put in that structure and regulation before we see that coming back in terms of any funding from government, and also in terms of, you know, the greater member numbers that will be required to service integrated mediation in the higher value schemes. So it's a tricky conundrum. We are committed to professionalizing our services. Very few of our functions are now run by volunteers, but there is certainly more that we can do in order to increase our capacity and increase the quality of the service that we provide. One of those improvements is a project that we're underway at the minute, is to migrate our registration and standards committee to an independent standards board, which will give us more independence between the standards that we set and the management board. It's a similar model to the one that the FMC run. Why has that come about? I think because quite rightly there's increased scrutiny on standards, and part of that has come from the MOJ and from government looking at integrated mediation. I think part of it is about us getting our house in order, and it seems right and proper that there's separation between standard setting and the management of the organisation. In the same way that we've made a separation between complaints and discipline and the board. So our complaints and discipline committee now is independent, led by a very experienced individual, John, who runs complaints and discipline for other membership organisations in other sectors, and who brings a huge amount of experience to the role and has helped us rationalise and improve the quality of that service. So independent standards board is something that we are working on, and that is multifaceted in that you'll be aware over the last couple of years we have broadened the scope of the CMC. Certainly when I joined, you know, we were looking at civil commercial mediation and workplace, and that was pretty much it. We're now also looking at peer mediation, most recently community mediation, which is a big step forward. We're also getting much more involved in academic institutions, and that again is partly my colleague Victoria's expertise, and partly simply having the professional capacity by having an extra member of staff to be able to start to look at these things. So all exciting developments, and certainly things that we wouldn't have been capable of doing a couple of years ago. So stepping in the right direction. Going back to the standards board, so we are looking to implement standards. Obviously, we already have standards for workplace and civil commercial, and we're looking at those at the minute to see if they need improvement or clarification, or whether we need to raise the bar, which is fundamentally part of our ethos, is to constantly drive up standards. But also we need to look at, we're looking at implementing community standards. We've implemented peer membership, and we're looking to implement peer standards. Fundamentally, we want to be the home of all mediation outside of the family space. Obviously, we also have a project with the College of Mediators on SEN mediation, and that cooperation has worked very well over the last few years. But again, we're looking at those standards and seeing if we need to drive them up further. The other aspect of standards is very much driven by government in terms of their requirements for integrated mediation, and so we're looking at how can we build collaboration across the sector to agree standards for integrated mediation, and that is obviously an area that will develop rapidly over the next few years if things continue to progress in the current direction. It's not without its challenges. Everybody's got a different opinion, but I think we will get there, and there is both the individuals, the required individuals, and the will to get that resolved over the coming months, and that is certainly another kind of game changer. So I've talked about membership. I've talked about a bit about where we've come over the last few years, and I'm pleased to say that I think the organisation is in a much better position now than it was a few years ago. There are definitely still challenges. When we come to look at strategy this autumn in terms of what are we going to do going forward, there are some fundamentals that are kind of enshrined in our charitable objectives, which we will obviously continue to support. Fundamentally, one of the things people quite often misunderstand about the organisation is that we are a charity. We aren't a professional body in terms of, we're not a trade body. So whilst we advocate for mediation and we try to educate the public in terms of the use of mediation, those are within our charitable objectives. It isn't necessarily our job to get our members more work. However, obviously that is in our interests in terms of driving up membership and ensuring that it's the mediation sector is sustainable. So that's where those two kind of almost competing objectives meet, and we have to walk that line carefully. What I am pleased to say is that increasingly government is leaning on us to help them do that. So I think some of you will have heard me say previously about 95% of our web traffic comes directly from government websites. So if you go onto a government website looking at mediation, it will direct you to one of two places, either ourselves or to FMC, depending upon which flavour of mediation you're inquiring about, and that's a hugely important link in terms of having the confidence of government that we are the place to come, and also in terms of educating the public. We're reaching out more and more in social media. That's something we would like to do yet more of, but again is up against the kind of resource constraint. One of the things that we're looking at going forward, or thinking about, is how can we broaden our membership appeal. So we have circa 900 members now. Even if we doubled or tripled that membership, it's still a fairly small number to run a sector. And so we're looking at the minute at how can we make ourselves more appealing and more useful to a wider audience. Particularly one idea that we're kicking around at the minute is there a way to help businesses adopt mediation by running some sort of recognition scheme that would now allow them to demonstrate the benefits of mediation, particularly to their staff. So not just in the commercial space, but also to their staff, to make them a more appealing place to work, and to everybody is in the fight for talent these days, and if we can show that mediation makes for a happier, more effective workplace, that's something that we want to push. So we're looking at that. And the advantage of that is essentially then, rather than being limited to maybe 2,000 or 3,000 members, effectively every business in the country becomes a potential member. And I have some experience of this with recognition schemes for veterans, and I've seen that implemented effectively, where essentially you reward organisations for their recognition of the value that veterans bring. And I think this is we could potentially run something similar, which would bring benefit both to the organisations themselves, but also to the membership. One of the reasons why we're going out for consultation is that we want ideas. You know, it's not our job to have all the bright ideas of how to promote mediation. The key thing is to recognise those ideas when we see them, and that's definitely something that we want to do. And so we're going to try and harness the horsepower of the membership to see where we can find advantages over the next 5 years. We're also going to test kind of existing assumptions. So that's certainly been my direction to the board, is that, you know, I want us to look at all aspects of the organisation and test whether or not they remain fit for purpose, or whether or not they remain advantageous to us going forward. Obviously, what the last few years has proved is that the situation can be quite fluid. You'll remember, some of you, that the MOJ has put out 2 consultations over the last couple of years with virtually no warning whatsoever. Always seems to be in July, I think, as everyone's knocking off for the summer. So, you know, both of those we didn't necessarily see coming, and therefore had to respond to very short timelines. Funnily enough, the civil servants tend to put them out in July, disappear for the summer, and then want them back by the 1st of September. But what it demonstrates to us is that as an organisation, we've got to be agile to change as it happens. Now, you know, COVID as a classic example, COVID was a real test for the mediation sector. My personal view is that actually it was hugely advantageous because it forced us to evolve. You know, most of you now will do much of your mediation online. At the beginning of COVID, when I had conversations with mediators, many said it was impossible to do it online. We've moved on. And so that kind of flexibility and adaptability is something that's important to this organisation as we try to move the sector forward in, let's face it, uncertain times. We just had a change of government. We haven't necessarily had clear direction as to what that will mean. We believe it will mean more of the same. Fundamentally, it's a central left government replacing a central right government, so it's probably unlikely to change massively, but the same challenges, particularly for the MOJ, remain in place, and therefore we hope that the solutions that they will be talking about be very similar to what we've talked to them about already. So I guess that's kind of where we are right now. I think that there are lots of opportunities for the sector and for the organisation. I think we are seeing gradually a kind of consolidation of the sector. You know, we're certainly seeing that from a membership perspective. We've a significant number of members who are joining or rejoining the organisation who are quite experienced, and that to us says that, you know, hopefully we're moving in the right direction and becoming more appealing. We want to get to a point where fundamentally you need to be a registered mediator or a member of CMC or FMC in order to mediate in this country. We believe that that's the right way to go. We believe that ensures standards, gives confidence in mediation. It allows government and the public to adopt mediation, comfortable in the fact that it is a proper grown-up profession. And I think the future is very, very bright, both for the organisation and for our individual members. So that's probably what I wanted to say. First off, I'm very happy to answer questions, any questions you might have, and I'm sure that will provoke further discussion as we go along.
Thanks very much, Paul. If people can put their hands up so we can take people in order. But can I first ask, Paul, could you give us a brief explanation of how one can become a fellow, moving on from lower grade membership?
Okay, so yeah, at the moment, and this goes back to what I just said about testing our assumptions. So at the moment, to become a fellow, you need 10 years of membership, and then you submit your application, and it is reviewed by the standards board, and they will make a decision. But you have to have a minimum of 10 years. One of my challenges to that board at the minute is why 10 years. You know, we may well have some individuals who've been mediators for 10 years but don't mediate very much, and therefore actually don't have much experience. You may have other mediators who've, you know, mediated for 5 years or 3 years, and have done hundreds and hundreds of mediations and actually are very experienced. So that is one of the things that we're looking to challenge. You should find on the website, you know, the requirements for fellow status, same as with pricing, etc. If you don't, then just drop Angela or Joe a message, and they can send it out to you. It is, I mean, there's two ways to look at it in terms of fellows. On the one hand, we want to uphold and maintain standards of fellows, and that's right and proper. It's the most senior title that we can bestow on our members. So there definitely needs to be, you know, a high standard to the fellow, a high bar of entry, if you like, to fellowship. On the other hand, we need to make it attainable. One of the key things that I'm very keen that we do is create this pathway from you know, associate to registered to fellow. That definitely needs some work, particularly I think the transition from associate to registered. My personal view is that observations aren't the way to go, or they aren't all of the solution. And I say that because there is no quality line in observerships. So you could go for an observation, it could be fantastic. You could go for an observation, it'd be a complete waste of time, and yet our system would recognize it as the same. So, you know, drawing on experience in other areas, you know, military as an example, you know, far more emphasis is put on simulation to ensure that you have a controlled training environment and you're able to ensure that there are genuine learning opportunities within it, whereas real life can throw up something fantastic or something not useful at all. So we want to create that pathway from associate to registered to fellow. Part of that is moving from registered to fellow. I don't have a fixed idea of what it should look like. All I think at this stage, and as I say, it's my challenge to the board at the strategy meeting on the 30th, is it fit for purpose? Is there a better way? And we'll see, and that will be one of the questions probably in the consultation, is to try and gather ideas around how we can make it better. I'll not skirt the issue. Obviously, financially, it's also beneficial for us to make that journey. You know, registered paid more than associates, and fellows pay more than registered. So, as part of looking at the business model, we also need to understand, you know, the realities of what that looks like. Are people making the transition? If they're not, why not? So all of those aspects we need to look at. But I think, you know, that career progression is a key retention tool for us, for members, and also, you know, we want to be able to recognize experience and expertise and make that clearly explained to the general public. So the progression is super important.
Thanks, Paul. If anybody wants to put up their electronic hand, please.
Probably just while you're thinking of questions, one of the topics I meant to cover earlier and I've forgotten is chartered status. So many of you will be aware that we've applied for a charter from the Privy Council. That process is reasonably mature. So we first spoke to the Privy Council probably about 18 months ago. They asked us then to go out to consultation and get recommendations from across the sector, which I'm pleased to say we received. We also managed to get recommendations from associated organisations and individuals who want to sit on the periphery or within the judiciary. That has now all been submitted to the Privy Council, and we are waiting the next response. I think, you know, to be candid, the process has been slower and slightly frustrating. In that, you know, we felt we'd already answered questions. We got asked the same question again, but I'm increasingly realising that is dealing with government in general. Yeah, we're confident that we've done everything we can to ensure the success of the charter bid. And at the moment, I don't have a timeline. We're simply waiting for them to come back. But I would hope within the next 6 to 9 months we will have it resolved one way or the other. And I can't say which way it'll go. But yeah, it's another exciting development for the organisation.
Thank you, Paul. Some questions or comments, please?
It's too early in the morning. Everyone's only had one coffee.
Yes. Otherwise, I'll pick on somebody. Derek, you're muted, Derek.
Right, I'm unmuted. Right, so okay. Dave, thanks. I'll ask a question just as we get us started. Paul, I'm quite an experienced mediator, but I'm not a member of the Civil Mediation Council. You've outlined some of the advantages of joining. This is not going to become compulsory, as I understand it, but it's moving in that direction. Is that a fair reading of where we are?
I think from our perspective, that's certainly an objective that we want to achieve. I think we are a million miles away from it being compulsory. What integrated mediation for higher level claims enables us to do, and this is the reason that we've spent 5 years pursuing it, is essentially become the gatekeepers to work. Now, not everybody will want to do these integrated mediation claims, but fundamentally, if you want to do them, if you want access to the 300,000 cases a year, then you would need to become a member, and that will be essentially we will be becoming the gatekeepers to that work. And I think we don't want to make it compulsory. We want to make it necessary in order to be a successful mediator. And I make that distinction because we don't want to mandate it, but flip side of the coin, we want to get to the point where we are of sufficient value to our members that everybody wants to be a member if they want to mediate. And I think that's the objective from our perspective.
Thank you very much. I think you're probably going to be receiving an application from me, having listened to you this morning.
Oh, cool. Thank you.
Thanks, Derek. Carl, I can see your hand up next.
Yes, good morning, everyone. Good morning, Paul. Thank you very much for that interesting update, which was well received by me anyway. One of the things you raised in your update was the issue of capacity of 900. We currently have 900 members roughly. And I think you indicated, if I heard correctly, that it was really important to increase the membership, probably doubling it up, and still there wouldn't necessarily be an adequate capacity to meet government expectations for the work coming in. I just wondered if you could explain how that works in more detail, because at the moment, mediators aren't getting the 900 or so, and not all would be, for example, experienced mediators for membership. How would 900, given that most of those people aren't getting work at the moment. How, if there's a great demand, surely there should be a lot of mediators literally pushed off their feet, not being able to cope. So if we double up and we have, for example, 1,800, the problem would be there would be even more mediators not getting opportunity unless there is tangible work. And the challenge is how does CMC arrive at, or the government perceive that there aren't enough people to deal with the work on hand, when in fact the experience on the ground is that they're not getting enough?
Yeah,
it should be a provider's market.
Yeah, understood. So this is the thing with the proposal for integrated mediation. It's like a tap. So at the moment, the tap is turned off. If it continues to progress in the direction that we think and hope that it will, that tap will then be turned on. So essentially, you won't be able to go to take a civil commercial case to court without having first attempted mediation. In terms of capacity, again, as we've learned over the last few years, government tends not to work very quickly. So we will have a significant lead time between a decision being made and it being implemented. So there is the opportunity to train. You know, if we are confident that that decision has been made and that the government has announced it, then we will have a significant lead time to train more mediators. However, firstly, it's important to recognise that we have 900 members. There are, to Derek's point, there are plenty of experienced mediators out there who aren't CMC members. So there is a pool of practicing talent that's out there that aren't currently members. There is also a very, very significant pool of trained mediators who are not practicing. So I think we're confident that there are around 10,000 mediators who have been through CMC accredited courses over the last few years who aren't within the sector. So that's a second source of mediators if push comes to shove. Fundamentally, and this goes back to what I said earlier, it's down to the government to make sure that the financial incentive for doing the work is sufficiently interesting to draw both new mediators into the sector and potentially to draw people back who have trained and are not practicing. So I agree with you 100%. At the moment, this is why we've pursued integrated mediation for the last 5 years, because it is a game changer. As I say, where the government is saying something around 300,000 cases a year. That's a game changer. For 900 mediators, that's a game changer. For the sector as a whole, it's a game changer. One, because the sheer volume of work will increase exponentially, but also because everybody, or certainly everybody, involved in running a business will then experience a mediation process. And that's a double-edged sword. Obviously, it needs that higher value claim process needs to provide a good experience of mediation. Otherwise, we'll bite ourselves on the backside. But it will change the culture of the country, because everybody will have experienced mediation, and therefore it will become the norm because it will be embedded in the judicial process. One of the concerns around the current form of integrated mediation that the government is introducing for lower value claims is that they are calling it mediation, but it is a very watered down version of mediation. And I understand that some people are really concerned about that. That said, strategically, it's a foot in the door. And if the government sees particularly the financial benefit of going down this route, and let's face it, that is the only thing that will move them sufficiently to change the system, then I think then we're on to bigger and better things. So we've almost got to grin and bear the low value cost scheme and accept the fact it's called mediation, even perhaps when the purists amongst us wouldn't deem it mediation, in order to get the door opened fully and have access to those 300,000 claims a year.
Thank you, Paul. That's helpful. That's broadened it up a bit. And just one last bit in terms of, you mentioned on with the Royal Charter that consultation, responses had come back. And I know that Privy Council is normally very slow. Sometimes they're a bit faster. It all depends. But in terms of the bodies that are supporting us, for example, how wide are those membership bodies? For example, we consulted right across all, most of the professional bodies, Chartered Management Institute. I mean, obviously, besides the ones that are outside the legal profession, because, for example, the Chartered Institute of Housing, there's a lot of implication for mediations there. I mean, I'm working with them in terms of developing a course because there are lots of conflicts in housing sectors, housing associations. Housing's big on the agenda. There was a big summit a few days ago. We should really be hitting, for example, people like that, the housing sector, because there's a lot of work. The housing ombudsman claimed that they've got too much work, but I don't think they're really implementing and using mediation as it ought to be used. I mean, this was really raised at the all-party working group. I think also through the all-party working group on ADR, we should be, sort of putting pressure in a nice way on a lot of these professional bodies so that they can start, soaking in. I mean, lots of them are familiar with mediation, but I think it's not heavily on the agenda. I mean, CIH is a good one to start with. Has it thoughts been gone in that direction on the board, or is that coming up on the board at all?
So in answer to that question, particularly with reference to charter, the problem with the charter process is they purposefully don't give you kind of boundaries. It's not like a box ticking exercise. They say you've got to consult, but they don't say who you've got to consult with or how many how many recommendations you need. I think we ended up with don't quote me on this, but around 100 recommendations from different organizations and sort of individuals. We have taken the view that because obviously it was a limited amount of resource on our side. How long do you chase people for a recommendation? So we drew up a list which covered obviously ADR, legal profession, a few organizations outside that, and a few government ministers, etc. And we pursued those. We got a good response rate, and we took the view that we could spend another 9 or 12 months pursuing more, but we didn't really know when is enough. So we took the view that we would submit, and it's a bit like having your homework marked. The aim is that we submit to the Privy Council. If we get turned down, they will then give us the reasons why we've got turned down, and we can then fix them. Otherwise, we could have been here in 2 years' time, and we were conscious that with all the changes going on at the minute, with government leaning into mediation, we had a window of opportunity to get our foot in the door. So that's what we've gone with. Will it be successful? Genuinely, I can't tell you. I don't know, and I don't think anyone can. So we did the best that we could with the resources we had and with the time. We've submitted, and then we're waiting for feedback. And if it's not good enough, we'll then set about fixing, the things that aren't good enough. Yeah, I think it's a rational approach, because no one could give us a straight answer, at least not the Privy Council, as to what did sufficient look like.
Great, thanks. Entirely understand. That's really helpful. Thank you, Paul.
Cool. Cheers, Carl.
Thanks, Carl. Leanne, you had your hand up, but I think it's gone down again. Would you like to say something still?
Yeah. I think all I wanted to say was kind of, obviously you're talking about increasing membership and also kind of moving from associate to fellow, associate to charter to fellow. My kind of background is in HR, so I've kind of got quite close links with the CIPD, and I think they're potentially, because they've got about 160,000 members across the world, they're perhaps a really good organisation if you're kind of aspiring to grow your membership and grow the CMC to kind of provide more. Maybe quite a good organisation to look at to see where they've come from, how they've done that, because sort of just been quickly looking at at your website and the CIPD website, and the kind of additional things that they provide members for their membership and stuff like that. And it might just be worth kind of sort of taking a look to sort of compare what you're offering and compare what they're offering, to look to see how, because they've obviously started off in a similar place. And another sort of, I suppose, ex-charity is the RCN, who I know are now kind of a union as well, but they were kind of, I suppose, set up originally as a charity to support sort of nurses and, you know, sort of trained nurses. So I think there are a lot of organisations out there that could perhaps give you that insight to help you grow further.
Absolutely, and I think you know, this goes back to what I was saying about needing to learn from other sectors. You know, the membership challenge is not just it's not just a sector thing. You know, as I say, I do 2 membership jobs, and in my other role, all the same concerns. It's on a bigger scale, but all the same challenges in terms of trying to grow membership, but making sure you do it in a sustainable fashion, making sure you're delivering member benefit. You know, there's no point in for example, in CMC, there's no point in bringing in a whole load of associates unless we're delivering benefit to them and they want to stay and they want to progress. So that is a challenge on several fronts. So yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. The other thing I would say is, you know, you mentioned CIPD International. You know, one of our current assumptions is that we're for England and Wales. You know, is that a rational assumption? I sort of understand it prior COVID, where everything was done face to face.
Yeah, now
obviously the world has changed. And should we be looking at supporting mediation more broadly? Is that a way of growing the pie, if you like, from a membership perspective, in order to help us deliver you know, more benefit to our members? I don't know, that's a discussion for the board, but we're definitely looking at all the sort of limiting factors at the minute and trying to figure out how do we move forward in a way that's agile, that delivers benefit and helps us get to the strategic objectives that we want.
Yeah, and I think from my point of view, for so I've kind of recently upgraded to chartered CIPD membership from associate, just because I couldn't be bothered to do it, and I've been in HR for like about 17-18 years. But I think the thing that I've noticed with mediation, I mean, I'm a trained mediator. When I finished my training, first of all, it was really difficult to know where to get the training. So it kind of, you know, trying to, whereas CIPD, usually the courses, you have to have a sort of level 7 qualification, and they kind of bolt your CIPD associate membership onto the back of that. So if you're on a level 7 course, that's kind of the CIPD rubber stamp for associate membership, and then you obviously have to prove yourself to be chartered or a fellow. But with I think with mediation, it was really confusing who I joined, what association. There's more than one. So there's a College of Mediators, there's a Family Mediation Council. So it's really difficult to find my way there. And again, you're sort of saying with work and stuff, it's been really difficult to find that. Also, I'm kind of a bit alienated where I live. Most of the mediators are in London and I'm not. So all in all, it's kind of been something where I have trained, and then I've picked it up, workplace mediation, with all the interim roles I've had, but I haven't actually had the opportunity to break into being a mediator, because it's really difficult to find that track as well. So I think there's loads of things that an organisation like you could support with, but I guess it's just getting it right to draw in people like me who are thinking, well, I give up, I'm just going to go back to HR now because I can't make it as a mediator.
And definitely, you know, geographical reach, that's something that I'm really pleased with, the way it's improved in the last few years. As I say, I have to say, helped by COVID, because we, as a society, we shifted, and you know, prior to COVID, mediation, I would argue, was a very London-based thing. Certainly, the CMC membership was very London-based. That's no longer the case, and I think we now need to extrapolate that and make sure, you know, as an example, we made a decision a few years ago to take during COVID, we took the conference online. We've never gone back, because attendance at the conference is much higher if we do it online than if it's done face to face. Of course, face to face with everyone there would be great, but fundamentally, if you live in, you know, Plymouth or you live in West Wales, actually getting to London for a conference is a lot of expense, if nothing else. So, you know, part of our remit is to deliver CPD to our members, and therefore, you know, online is the way we can do that most effectively. So, and you know, this meeting here, you know, some of you will be in London. I'm in Herefordshire. You know, we're scattered all over the country, but I think ensuring that we deliver that benefit to our members is crucial, whilst still trying to help the sector develop. And that's sometimes where we caught between a rock and a hard place, is that, you know, as Carl said earlier, you know, there's lots of mediators who haven't got any work. And that is because the sector is not sufficiently mature that everybody recognizes the need for mediation. It is our job to promote the sector, but it's not our fault that the sector is not mature. It's just where we are as a society. So, you know, as things improve, we are also gaining benefit from that. But again, one of the reasons why we're pushing integrated mediation is because it will be a game changer culturally, in that everybody will get to understand what mediation really is, and whether they like it or not, they'll have had to use it. So in that scenario, it will grow the pie for everybody. We just got to make sure that the standards and processes are in place to make sure that transition happens as smoothly as possible. There's bound to be teething problems, of course there will be, but you know, what we don't want is a scenario where mediation gets itself a bad name because the standards aren't high enough, because, you know, because you've got rogue individuals who maybe aren't delivering at the standard they need to be. We need to get all that in place before the government turns on the tap, with essentially no support other than our you know, member subscriptions, which I understand is, you know, is a chunk of money for everyone. But really what we could do is some, you know, a chunk of money, and I think this happened to the FMC a while ago, but a chunk of money from government to say, okay, right, we recognize in order for us to make, you know, X million savings in the current judiciary, we need you to provide the following, and therefore here's, and we're not talking big numbers here by their standards, to help us get everything set up. We're not currently in that position. We are talking to them about it, but as ever, you know, getting money out of government is like getting blood out of a stone. So especially,
and I know as well from my kind of, I suppose, experience in HR until I trained as a mediator, I guess the cost to business of getting an external mediator in can run into thousands, whereas obviously I've trained on top of my HR training, so I'm able to deliver workplace mediation. So whenever something like this erupts in the workplace, you can kind of, you know, either, so a lot of organizations where you said earlier, and they're not reaching out for that mediation support, because why are you going to pay thousands of pounds to get two people that, you know, just exit one from the business? So it's there's a lot of work to do.
Excellent.
Definitely.
And you're quite right, and that's you know, that's another challenge, is go back to challenging our assumptions. Should we be doing more to bring mediation training into leadership and HR
100% HR.
You know,
because it always gets tasked. HR always gets tasked with it, sort it out. So if you're not trained, you can, I've seen people try to mediate, well, I called it mediation, but it's like maybe a very badly facilitated conversation, and it makes the situation 100 times worse. By them just doing it, thinking that they're doing the right thing, but actually they don't have the skills to do it properly. So it's definitely, but yeah, I mean, I'm more than happy, sort of, I suppose, with my experience of CIPD membership, my experience as a trained mediator, to, you know, sort of support or give any input to you know, sort of help any decision making you make.
Well, as I say, we'll be coming out to the membership for consultation in the next couple of months, with the aim of trying to capture as many ideas as possible, and then it's, I guess, my job and the board's job to wade through those and pick what we think is deliverable over the next 5 years, and what is, you know, very often aspirational but not deliverable. So it's finding that line, isn't it, between pushing ourselves enough that we genuinely move both the organisation and the sector forward, whilst at the same time making sure that it's rational, sensible, objective, and actually achievable. So all those things.
Okay.
Cool.
We've reached 10 o'clock. I can see that Gerard has got his physical left hand up.
I can't find my electronic one, Dave.
Oh, well, and also Michael, perhaps if you've got enough time, Paul, if you can take one question from each of Gerard first, please.
Paul, thanks for all of that. Just a quickie on observations, which are key to CMC membership. What's the, and there are, you know, hundreds, if not thousands of new mediators being trained monthly. What is the CMC doing to improve the chances of getting observations is the first limb. Second limb is, what's the CMC's view on charging for mediations? Because you've got to be observed, you've got to observe, the observer has to observe a CMC mediator. So are they allowed to charge for that?
So I understand where you come from. So the short answer is, looking at it, as I said earlier, personally, my view is that observations can be useful, but there's no guarantee they're going to be useful. And if we're making that a hurdle to progression, then you want to be confident that they are going to be useful. So I can't give you a straight answer as to what we're doing about it. What I can tell you is my challenge to the new independent standards board is we've got to change the system because it's not working. How can we facilitate to make it work better, either through paid observations or through simulation, or a combination of the, I'm not writing anything off at the minute. And so when we come out with the consultation, we'll ask for ideas around it and see if we can find a better solution, because as I say, I've been here 7 years and observations were an issue when I came, and they're still an issue now. And the difference is the quantum. So if we've got a third of our membership as associate, who the hell is going to provide all the observations for 33% of the membership? That's a lot of people. So we've got to find a way to be able to deliver that development at scale. So watch this space, I think, is the answer.
Okay, thanks.
And Michael, lastly.
Sorry, I was on mute. Thank you. Paul, could you say a little bit about the integrated mediation, where the mediator is going to come from? It's sort of a lot of the, in Jared's question just a moment ago, there are all these people training as mediators who've gone through that process and have gone through their observations and so on. They seem like a good resource that should be utilized. And how can we bring those, in other professions, it's quite normal to have more junior members of the profession practice on the smaller cases and learn as they go on. That's really how you learn and how you improve your skills. So this is an opportunity. How can new mediators grab the opportunity?
Agree 100%. One of the things that we've done when we brought in the associates was giving them the license to practice, which wasn't the case previously. So we are trying to encourage younger, less experienced mediators to get stuck in and get experience, because that's the only way they're going to improve. I agree with you as far as integrated mediation for the smaller cases is concerned. That's not currently the model that the government's looking at. They're looking at utilising their own mediators, and that may be career options for trained mediators anyway. Between you and me, I'm not convinced that they've got the capacity to do it. So I think it may well spill out it to us to help support. I'm quite happy for them to discover that on their own, because I think that plays to our advantage. But I do think, in order to provide experience for these associates, particularly, we've got to grow the pie, and the small claims integrated mediation scheme is a way of doing that. We'll wait and see over the next couple of months what happens with it from a delivery perspective. But I suspect there may well be that opportunity for our younger mediators. There's a fine line between trying to guide the government in terms of what they implement, and telling them that they don't know what they're talking about. So we'll allow them maybe to trip over that one, and then we can ride to the rescue. I think is probably where I'm coming from.
Thanks very much, Paul. I know you've got to go now.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I've read too much.
No, that's fine. No problem. We'll carry on.
Okay.
But before we do, just a date for your diary. Provisionally, the next meeting is going to be on Wednesday, the 20th of November.
Okay.
I'll
Brilliant.
send a notification of it when we have confirmation for a speaker. And we've also got an evening social coming up, and I'll send confirmation of that as soon as I can as well.
Brilliant. Lovely. Thanks very much, guys. Nice to meet you all.
Thanks, Paul.
Thank you.
Cheers.